Hi everyone, welcome to Tech Bytes Takeover. This is the second episode we're doing this, or as I like to call it, Between Two Geese. I'm Tyler Jurgens, Senior Technical Product Marketer here at Veeam. Alongside me is Matt. Matt, why don't you go through a little bit of what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, excited to be here again today, Tyler. Always having a great time doing these. So today we got a great show lined up. We're going to talk about 3 things that you need to know about software appliances, including what makes the newly released Veeam Software Appliance so special. We're going to demo 2 features as part of this release, things that maybe if you haven't played around with it yet, you might not be aware of. We're going to have one frequently asked questions session as well, completely inspired by the community. There's been lots of buzz about this release, so we're really going to draw on that to answer hopefully a lot of the most common questions. We're also going to take a story straight from the news, go talk about that a little bit to start with, and all of this leaving with 0 regrets for tuning in. So with all that being said, Tyler, I know we talked a little bit about this, late last week, early this week, supply chain attacks, right? There's been something a little noteworthy with that this week. Care to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so big news story hit just a little while ago about the NPM supply chain attack. So this is a pretty fascinating story to me because there is a maintainer here of multiple different NPM packages. So we're talking Node.js, key component of many websites. And what was fascinating about this one to me is how targeted the attack was. Like if you've looked at, the email that the guy got that really got him to compromise his MFA. Like it was very well written, very targeted, and really would have made anybody probably not think twice about it. It gave me a good example to go, never click the links you get in the email. Even if you believe them, even if they're trusted links, my default is always, hey, I'm going to go to the site. I'm going to go to the MFA reset or whatever I need to do so I know I'm at the trusted site itself rather than clicking a link from the email. Matt, did you have any thoughts on this one?
Oh, yeah, lots of thoughts. First off, shout out to Nico joining us from the Bay Area. Thanks for popping in here. But yeah, let's step back a little bit. A supply chain attack. What is that? Think of it as a way that an attacker could get inside an organization without necessarily attacking them directly. But what that can really do is open up big vulnerabilities across the board. So Tyler, you mentioned this as part of NPM, and basically what happened is this developer, very prominent developer, 18 packages were compromised. So you might say, you know what? That might not have a very big impact. It's only 18 packages. But if you take a look at the stats, they're actually downloaded over 2 billion times a week. So people from across the globe are pulling this in, whether they realize it or not. For example, just like Dominique, who's in Costa Rica right now. Great to have you join us. But it's really a global issue that's going on here. Now, the other interesting thing about this is when you've got 2 billion packages being downloaded, you don't necessarily know where they're being used. You don't know if they're being used in your organization. You don't know if they're being used in software that you might have purchased somewhere. So this is actually a pretty big deal that affects a lot of people. In this case, as you mentioned, the account was compromised. Somebody clicked on a link. They thought that, hey, you know what? I'm being asked to reset my password here. Let me go through and do that. And the threat actors actually stole the credentials and immediately started uploading malicious packages. So it was extremely targeted, right? The threat actors knew what they were doing. They knew who they were targeting, and they clearly had a plan in place because they started acting right away. Now, something that did stand out to me is this had the potential to be absolutely catastrophic, but it wasn't. Now, why was that, Tyler?
Well, it wasn't because of a very dedicated and concerted effort to stop it. So the guy followed a great process, engaged the people that he needed to engage right away, fully admitted, hey, I've been attacked, I've been pwned, and started working immediately to mitigate that attack. And it just shows that it's super important to have a very defined plan for compromise, right? Having incident response plan can significantly help mitigate any of the disasters that may happen because it's really not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And this attack was fascinating to me because this one guy had so many different dependencies, and it reminded me of the XKCD comic here, where there's lots of open source packages out there. Hi Chris from Kelowna, good to see you join us. But there's a lot of open source packages out there, and a lot of the web infrastructure of today is built off these different open source, different packages. And this guy has like clearly a whole pile of different packages he maintained himself. So, like you said, very targeted, and very fascinating attack. Is super interesting read.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot, for those of us who were in IT a few years ago when the Log4j compromise happened. So it's not quite, that wasn't a supply chain attack, but it had such a huge impact in that so many organizations didn't even know if they were affected. They had to rely on vendors and so forth to actually audit their code. So it's very pervasive. And shout out to you, Alan. Thanks for joining in on this. Always appreciate the support. But the other thing that I also want to highlight is I appreciate that this person, like you mentioned, owned up to the fact that they were the weakest link in all of this. They're what caused the compromise. And hopefully they're in an environment that actually encourages this sort of behavior. Hey, I did something wrong. Let me raise my hand and advise you about this. Versus, I did something wrong. Maybe if I don't say anything, it could fly under the radar. But, one other takeaway that I have from this is it's so important to kind of, have that ability to trust the updates that you're getting. So one of the things that was basically helped minimize the blast radius on this is people identified right away these packages were changed and we can't trust these updates. Now, that's kind of one of the big reasons why folks like to use, for example, software appliances, because it takes away a lot of that management hassle. It's able to pull updates in a lot of cases from a trusted source. So let's shift gears a little bit. We're going to talk about what is a software appliance, but before we get into that, question for the audience. What are some examples of software appliances that you know of? Feel free to drop your answers into chat. Would love to hear it. A lot of us who have been around in the IT world for a while, we're probably very familiar with, for example, the VMware vCenter appliance. But Tyler, why don't you take it away? Walk us through what is a software appliance and why people should care.
Yeah, there's a lot of really generic software appliances out there. And what a software appliance essentially boils down to is just something that is dedicated for a specific task. So you'll get an installer somewhere, often an ISO, sometimes an OVA. Depending on the vendor itself, they'll present you with whatever install options you have. But it's very purpose built. So it's specific for a task at hand. Ones that I often use are firewall appliances. So you can have different ones like your OpenSense, your firewalls like that, or your NSX firewalls, and they're very much just an OS that has an application running on it that is configured to do a very specific task that you don't deviate from. Like you're not going to find an Office suite installation on your firewall appliance. Like you don't need to be editing Word docs within your firewall. So it really mitigates that blast radius down to only the software that is on there itself. So it's a great way of giving you just what you need and only what you need for the task at hand. And really, it's just there for that turnkey operation. So if you need to deploy something, multiple different areas on scale, whether you have one or whether you have many, it really gives you a lot of that flexibility there. And so that kind of brings us into the next thing, Matt, what is a Veeam software appliance then?
Well, if you haven't heard, you've kind of missed some pretty big news. The Veeam Software Appliance is here. So what is it? Well, it's a new way to deploy the Veeam data platform. And it's actually globally available right now, but it's in an early release stage. Now, don't let that confuse you. Really what it comes down to is R&D was able to put in some tremendous effort, and they actually got the product ready ahead of time. So rather than hold on to it, We want to get it out to the world because it solves a lot of problems. So what is the Veeam Software Appliance? Well, it's a turnkey way to actually deliver Veeam backup and replication, which is part of the Veeam data platform, in a pre-configured, pre-hardened, optimized way so that, you can actually start deploying this consistently, securely from day one. That's adhering to best practices. I'll have, for example, like the DSA-STIG profile already in place. So it's a way to ensure that you're protected really from the get-go and that you're adhering to as many best practices as possible.
Absolutely, Matt. And like, I know when I'm going through, and I've worked in operations for a long time, if I'm going through and trying to harden and trying to secure an environment, following all the guidelines of the DSA STIG myself is a lot of work. I mean, it might be a lot of fun, Matt. And maybe that's something that you find fun, but it is definitely a lot of work. So when you get something like this, it really helps minimize the amount of effort you have to put in as an administrator to get anything done. And I really like what Chris says is like that appliance OVA is a happy middle between building out and maintaining your own purpose-built solution. He hits the nail on the head, right? You don't have to build it yourself. It comes already pre-configured from your vendor. So it's a wonderful way of doing this. And one of the things I really want to shout out about what we do with the Veeam software appliance is that pre-hardened, pre-configured deployment method, because you don't have to go through that. And not all software appliances are created equal. We take the approach because your backup infrastructure is so critical and attackers are trying to get at it every chance they get. We want to make sure this is the most secure environment in your entire infrastructure. What
Absolutely. And I love Chris's comments about being that happy middle ground because one of the things that we didn't really touch on as well is the skills required to maintain traditional deployments. So whether that's Windows skills, Linux skills, that mainly becomes a moot point with particularly the Veeam software appliance. So we haven't really touched on it, but the Veeam software appliance is basically Veeam backup and replication running on a hardened Linux OS. But that's a great thing. You don't need to be some sort of advanced Linux admin in order to actually deploy this. Well, we'll jump into the demo here in a few moments, but a question for the audience: like, have you actually tried out the VSA yet? So it's readily available on Veeam.com. It's something you can actually go out try today. Whether you're an existing customer, whether you're a prospect, whether you're brand new to the idea of just backing these things up, go try it out. There's a free trial, super easy to get going because that barrier to entry is so low. You just have to be able to deploy whether it's an OVA or install from an ISO.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. I really want to give a shout out to Joe Gramillion, the OG Joe G, one of our senior solutions architect who just published our first security blueprint that incorporates a Veeam software appliance. And I'll bring up the PDF here right away for us.
Yeah,
And you
I
can really
love
see that.
these
Yes,
as blueprints. They're so great to follow along with.
absolutely. I've been following them as a customer for years, and I like to show them here to anybody that needs to know. It's like, well, how do you deploy, and what kind of infrastructure, what constitutes a great scalable environment here? And I think what Joe did here was show that you can back up about 1,000 VMs. I think it's 100 physical workloads to our vault storage. And you can see here he uses the Enterprise Manager built on the Veeam software appliance. He uses proxies built on that Veeam infrastructure appliance on that same just enough OS that the rest of our infrastructure is built on. And using that Veeam hardened repository, which is honestly one of my favorite things that Veeam has done over the last few years, that gives you that immutable repository that you can deploy on hardware that you have lying around, or you can buy something new. But it's really flexible and gives you that way to get that immutability on premise. I know we talked about that last episode, but I want to showcase it here again. Any comments you had on this?
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I love about this securely blueprint, well, first of all, it's the first V13 securely blueprint that we have. So fantastic, right? Once again, great work, OG Joe G. Appreciate that's great stuff. The other thing is if you actually go to the securely blueprints site, you'll find this under VDC, which is our cloud platform. Now, why is that? If we're running VSA on-prem, the Veeam software appliance on premises, it's a matter of we're leveraging Veeam Vault as part of this. So that's the cloud component here. That's the storage that you're able to use. You don't need to worry about API calls and all that. Very easy to figure out how much storage do I need? What's that predictable cost? Fantastic there. And it's available globally. Just like, for example, I know we've got someone tuning in here from Turkey. You know what? It doesn't really matter where you are because Veeam Vault is available globally. So this blueprint definitely goes a long way. So just, let's do a quick transition here. We're going to jump into the lab, start transitioning to the demos. But before we do that, just want to reintroduce ourselves. I know we've had a lot of friends joining in here as of late. My name is Matt Crape. I'm joined here with Tyler. We're both senior technical product marketers here at Veeam. And we're just really here to, help share some knowledge. So if you find this useful, feel free to leave comments. We're live streaming right now on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and X. And don't forget to subscribe if this is something that you find useful. So Tyler, why don't you tee us up here?
Yeah, absolutely. So here we're in our demo, and surprise, surprise, everything looks very similar to what you're used to. So with the Veeam Software Appliance, we have redone a lot of the icons on that thick client that you're used to. So you can see it all has that same look and feel, but a little shinier, a little newer. I love what we've done with the icons and the different color schemes. You can actually do dark mode now with this as well. But I want to kind of show a bit of like maybe the Veeam updater, right? One of the great features we have here is I mentioned before with that Veeam infrastructure appliance, you got your proxies, you got your hardened repositories. Maybe you've got one proxy, maybe you've got 100, but how do you manage that? How do you keep those up to date? And that's so critical when you're talking about your infrastructure. I'm going to look directly at the camera when I say this, but when you're talking about your infrastructure, keeping it up to date really keeps you from getting any of those attack vectors or really mitigating a lot of those attack vectors that come on. It's one of the top things you can do, keeping yourself up to date and MFA. And Veeam takes care of that for you. So let me jump over and show you a little bit about that infrastructure and what you can do. So when you're looking here in your managed servers, you'll notice that we've got a proxy here, we've got a VHR here, and they're up to date. We've got our Veeam software appliance obviously here as well, but they're all showing up to date. And why is that? It's because our updater is constantly looking out there for different packages and trying to make sure that we are staying relevant and staying up to date with the software that gets pushed down from our repository. So you're not going off to some random internet repository anywhere. It's actually managed by Veeam. Do you have any comments on this demo directly, Matt?
Oh, absolutely. I want to give a shout out to Dominique. She left a great comment on LinkedIn here where she said, the move from customer managed Windows Server to Veeam managed Linux based OS, that's epic. And I think this is a great example, right? We're able to do a lot of that patch management that traditionally may be a little bit cumbersome, and for anyone who's managed Linux machines before, that could be a whole other ball of wax. You have to start worrying about library versions and all that sort of jazz, setting up your repositories. So providing a way to keep not only the Veeam software appliance up to date, but also a lot of the Veeam components through, an easy to manage interface. I mean, that's going to save so many people so much time. It's going to make things easier. And to your point earlier, it's going to ensure that they remain secure, right? So right out of the box, you can start managing your fleet of Veeam components and know that you're running the latest, that you're staying secure.
Absolutely, Matt. Absolutely.
So actually, quick question here from Chris. He wants to know, can the updates be managed or are they pushed without input or approval?
Great question. They can be managed. And give me a second here. My host management here timed out. But I think I can show that here from this section as well. So we get our update settings. Perfect. This is what I want to show you. We can get secure updates only, and we can get secure and optional updates. On top of that, you can set the maintenance window that works for you. So you can configure that right here to say when you want it, what days you want it, and how often you want it. Maybe you want it to push updates all the time. It will reboot the systems if you need to, but oftentimes when I ran through this and I did it in our lab, didn't require a reboot. It just pushed the packages because again, this is a Linux appliance underneath. Oftentimes you can patch those live without requiring a full system reboot. So you get a lot more uptime and a lot of consistency with your patch management. So great question there.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And I was just going to add to that. I love that ability to have that flexibility when it comes to updates, being able to create your own update windows because every organization is different, right? Maybe you can only apply updates, guess what, between 3 and 5 p.m., unlike every other organization out there where it's between 12 a.m. and 3 a.m., for example. So you're able to find something that meets the needs for your own organization. It's not set in stone. And once again, that's the flexibility that a lot of people just need in order to perform their day-to-day tasks.
right. And one thing I want to show here for the next thing is just how easy it is to create backup jobs within that web UI. So we've shown before we got that thick client. I brought it up. It's everything you've known and loved before from Veeam, but you also now get this new web UI to be able to do this remotely. So wherever you are, as long as you have access to the web UI, you can create a backup job. So let's create a backup job here. We'll aptly name it Geese because we're going to back up some Geese servers here. We're going to get some virtual machines. Let's get our repository here. I'm going to find one of mine. Perfect. I got a jump box here. This is exactly what I need to back up. Because even if it's a jump box, sometimes you have some important documents, some important work that you've done on it. We're going to select our backup proxy. I want to show you, hey, we can actually, with our Veeam Infrastructure Appliance proxy, I can now have that targeted for my proxy here. And Matt, while I go through the rest of the settings, why would somebody want to target a proxy specifically?
Oh, there's a few different reasons. I mean, a lot of it could come down to performance, locality, right? Maybe you've got proxies set up at remote sites. Maybe they're on separate VLANs, security constructs. Maybe it's just a resource thing. You might have multiple proxies, but some of them are more overworked than others. So the ability to figure out, hey, can my existing proxies handle this load? Should I deploy a new proxy in order to increase how much throughput I get? There's lots of different reasons. But there's also a great question that just came in from LinkedIn Live here. So the question really revolves around triggering backup and support for inline malware scans. Now, so the short answer is yes, but the longer answer is this is something that we need to kind of reiterate. This is Veeam Backup and Replication V13. This is, the release. Yes, we're showing you the web UI. There's still a thick client if you're running it from a Windows machine and you want that, more of a legacy type of interface. That's still available, but this is the full product. It is the early release. We're going to have the Veeam Data Platform full release coming out at a future date. But, if you're joining late, that's the whole premise around this. Is this V13 for Veeam Backup Replication was ready, and we got it out there because it solves so many problems. So sorry for that little bit of a tangent there, Tyler. I'll kick it back to you.
No, I appreciate that, Matt. So as you were going through and talking about this, I hope our people at home, our viewers at home, our viewers at work were following along because I was going through the rest of the backup process here, creating a backup job. A couple things I always like to do when I create a backup job is create that encryption key. Always encrypt your backups. I love doing that because if you're sending it off to the cloud or you're sending it off to even your local on-premises repository, it's important to have them encrypted. So I set that. I set some health checks because you need to make sure that the data doesn't, suffer from bit rot sometime in the future, right? Hardware does fail. It's not avoidable. See here we've got it. We've got the summary. We've got the backup job, and hey, we can actually create a PowerShell script here to just back up or run our Geese backup job. That's pretty cool. I like that it shows that because it gives you a way to go, hey, I've done this through the GUI. How can I script this and make it go?
You know what's great about that? That echoes something that Jonathan sent us. He said he installed the Veeam software appliance in his home lab and all his PowerShell scripts just worked, right? Because once again, it's the full Veeam backend replication, and very much to your point right now, Tyler, like you get the PowerShell, it still works. So this is a fantastic experience. And quick shout out to everyone watching this. We really appreciate all the interaction, all the questions. That's how you know it's live, right? So yeah, what, keep going with this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's kind of what I want to show you for the backup jobs. Now, over here, you can also see we can do backup copy jobs. A lot of the interface looks very similar, so I'm not going to walk through all that again. But one of the things I really wanted you to see when you do this, and we do this through the web UI, is that it looks and feels very similar to what you had with that traditional thick client that we've had for years. So you're not trying to jump and go, okay, now Veeam has changed this. They've got me a web UI and I have to learn something new. And there is a little bit of learning that you can do here, but it's not wild. It's not out of the realm of everything you can do. And one thing I really want to show here, we're kind of going a little long. I want to get to the FAQs, but you got that dashboard view here, powered by Veeam One. This is one of my favorite features of Veeam, and it's all integrated right here within the web UI directly.
Yeah, one interface to rule them all, right? So yes, we've been getting a ton of questions throughout, and we've been trying to stay on top of them. But time is running short. So why don't we switch gears a little bit and actually talk about some of the most commonly asked questions, and hopefully that will help answer a lot of the questions that viewers may have, in addition to maybe spurring some other questions along the way. So why don't you kick us off? Will there be a Windows-based V13? I think this is the number one question I've heard.
Absolutely. And everybody, you've jumped in, you've grabbed your hands on the Veeam Software Appliance. But yes, absolutely, there will be a Windows-based Veeam 13, version 13. We're not getting rid of that Windows application. It's still going to exist, and you'll still be able to upgrade your version 12 to your version 13 of Windows when it comes out. So we've got that. It's coming later in 2025. As we say here, the paint is never dry, so I can't give you exact firm dates, but it is coming. I'm looking forward to that. And we got another question here. Can I migrate or import my configuration directly from my Veeam 12 or version 12 right into version 13? Matt, why don't you answer that for us?
So today, no, but there will be a conversion tool that is coming. So as part of this, once again, it's an early release. We don't have the Windows version ready yet. You will require to upgrade your Windows 12, your Veeam Data Platform 12 environment up to 13 in order to perform this migration anyways. So a lot of the guidance that we've been giving is prepare your upgrade like usual, because whether you need to do your own testing, whether you need to start scheduling maintenance windows, when V13 for Windows comes out, treat it like normal. But we've also got a sign up page available where you can actually sign up to be one of the first to know when that conversion tool is available, if you need assistance with it, and so forth. So what it kind of boils down to is a Veeam Software Appliance. The best way to think about this is it's a bit of a new deployment method, right? It takes care of, we saw earlier, a lot of the hardening for you, the updates, the patching, a lot of the management that could be a little bit time consuming today. But because it's a new deployment model, you do need to have some sort of way to move from Windows if you choose to. But to Tyler's point, you also don't need to migrate off Windows. You don't need to convert from Windows. So that's going to be around for a while still.
Yeah, and Matt, I want to jump in and answer one of the questions that was asked. Said the disk requirements that come with the VSA or the Veeam Software Appliance, and that is a great shout out. So we require 2 disks for the Veeam Software Appliance, mainly because, well, you need a spot for your operating system and you need that location for your logs. But we also have a repository on the Veeam Software Appliance directly that can be immutable. So when you are deploying this infrastructure, you still have that all-in-one box capability that Veeam has had for many, many years. So that's why we have the new disk requirements there. And there's also a quick question about the license. You can still bring your Veeam Universal License from version 12 and use it on the Veeam Software Appliance or the Windows version 13 when it comes out as well. And then finally here, or another question we have, can I run V12 and V13 together, Matt?
So that actually kind of ties into that question you just answered about licensing as well. So the short answer is yes. Now, there's some caveats with that. Licensing restrictions still apply. So if you're trying to run this in production and you've got, let's say, 100 Veeam Universal license that you can use, you do need to be cognizant of how many workloads are you backing up. You can't exceed that 100 vols from just a licensing agreement standpoint. That's still there. Now, the other portion of this is yes, you can run that. Just like today, you can have multiple VBR servers in your environment, but they can't share some of those components, right? A lot of those components, for example, a repository should only belong to one Veeam backup replication server. So keep that in mind. I mean, once again, this is super easy to deploy. So start kicking the tires on it. Deploy it in a test area if you can. Start, maybe creating some small backups, like Tyler mentioned. There's actually a repository built right into the Veeam Software Appliance. And there's another great question here that kind of ties into this as well from Stefan asking, is it possible to install the Veeam Software Appliance on physical hardware? Absolutely, right? Once again, this is a new deployment model. We could give you an OVA if you want to deploy this in the VMware environment, and the ISO for pretty much wherever else you could use an ISO. If you can upload the ISO to whether it's some sort of public cloud that you have and build a machine off of that, yeah, you could do that if the cloud provider supports it. Or if you still want to have physical deployments, absolutely. So this runs very similar to the Veeam hardware repository that we've had for quite a while. So very similar system requirements, hardware requirements, but the short answer is yes. Tyler,
Yeah.
I've lost track of how many questions we've answered. This has been fantastic.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah, absolutely, Matt. I'm super thrilled by all the engagement we've had from everybody out there. Thank you so much for joining us. I think, though, Matt, we're a little over time. We're going to have to close it out. Please keep dropping your questions into chat, and we will still look. I'll go back through the LinkedIn chat, and I'm going to answer any questions that were left behind. But really, Matt, there's a few spots you can find us here. You can find us on socials. We mentioned those earlier. You can find us on the Veeam channels. And if you're going to be at the FallCon conference, Matt, are we going to be there?
Darn tootin' we are. These two geese are going to be flying south, and we'll be at the Falcon conference next week. We'll both be hanging around the Veeam booth. You might see us elsewhere. So if you happen to find yourself there, please do not hesitate to reach out. We'd love to have a conversation, whether it's about Veeam, whether it's about our LinkedIn Lives that we're doing here. We're always very open to hear from you to find out what is it that you would like to hear, what works for you, and ultimately just have that conversation.
Absolutely, Matt. It's going to be a honking good time. So with that, I think we're going to say goodbye. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and have a great day.
Thanks all.